Welcome to this explainer. Today, we're cracking open a really unique set of case files. We're going to look through a cold, gray investigative lens to examine a truly grim modern true crime case. And then, we're going to cross-reference it against the psychological baselines of our medieval ancestors. Basically, we're looking at what happens when the human mind, which, evolved for tight-knit community survival, is pushed to its absolute breaking point in our highly isolated, hyper-connected modern world. Okay, let's dive right into this. The reality of this case is just chilling. We're looking at the murder of Becky Bleifnik in Quincy, Illinois. She was a healthy, vibrant mother of three, known for making homemade Halloween costumes, super active in her community, and she was found executed in what everyone considered a safe, typical middle-class neighborhood. The sheer overkill described in this detective's testimony, it immediately signaled to investigators that this was absolutely no random prowler. It was personal, and it was deeply venomous. Section 1, the Quincy murder file. We need to treat these true crime details as hard evidence for our broader psychological investigation. Walk through this timeline with me. Picture this. It's 1 a.m. in freezing February, and CCTV captures a lone figure on a bicycle, which is a highly unusual sight for Quincy at that hour. Just 11 minutes later, at 11:11 a.m., Becky's phone registers a desperate, incomplete call to 91126. In her absolute terror, she hit extra numbers. Then, at 8:24 a.m., her estranged husband, Tim Bleifnik, calls the children's school multiple times and actually arrives early to pick up their boys, insisting they do not walk home. Why? Well, because he allegedly didn't want them discovering their mother's body. 14. Let that number sink in for a second. That is the number of times Becky was shot. And honestly, the coldest, grayest fact of this entire case, the medical examiner testified that literally none of these were immediately fatal kill shots. Her spinal cord was hit, paralyzing her, and she was just left to slowly bleed to death in excruciating pain on her own bathroom floor. Moving on to Section 2, digital footprints and alibis. It's fascinating how the killer tried to cover their tracks using modern tactics, completely unaware of the invisible nets they were tangling themselves in. So on paper, Tim Bleifnik had what looked like a rock-solid physical alibi. He was at his own house with his three sons. But his digital and physical trail? Actually, scratch that. It wasn't just a trail. It was an incredibly sloppy neon sign pointing right at him. Police executed a search warrant and found over 50 spent shell casings in his basement, an exact match to the ones scattered around Becky's body. They found shredded Aldi grocery bags with matching plastic bits used as a makeshift silencer at the scene. They found a crowbar matching the forced entry. Oh, and they discovered that the blue Schwinn bike seen on CCTV, yeah, it was purchased using a fake Facebook profile under the highly original name John Smith. Now this is where it gets crazy. Tim actually tried to outsmart modern surveillance. He left his phone at home and disconnected his Whoop fitness tracker wristband. But investigators are smart. They noticed the exact gaps where his device disconnected perfectly matched the timeline of the killer riding that bicycle on CCTV. So his attempt to vanish off the digital grid actually became the very footprint that proved he was slipping out into the night. And if that wasn't enough to seal the deal, his search history was basically a window into a dark, isolated obsession. I mean, he Googled how to make a silencer, how to wash off gunshot residue, local police response times, and how to use a crowbar to pry open a door. It's this hyper-documented, deeply paranoid premeditation that is just so unique to modern crimes. All right, Section 3, the modern breaking point. This brings us to a critical pivot in our analysis, shifting from the micro details of the Quincy murder file to a macro view of our society. We really have to ask ourselves, how does a family that appeared to be living the ultimate American dream completely spiral into an environment of such chronic stress, toxic resentment, and deadly isolation? The truth is, the human brain just didn't evolve to handle the pressures of modern secrecy and perpetual digital performance. Just look at the stark contrast here. On one hand, you've got this outward illusion. Tim was a local football Hall of Famer. They were active churchgoers. They even appeared on a national episode of Family Feud. But beneath that, the cold gray reality. A brutal, contentious divorce, allegations of financial deceit, and a husband retreating to a basement, totally detached from reality, secretly Googling how to execute his wife. Let's turn to Section 4, evidence from the past. We're going to open up some historical case files to see how our ancestors managed the baseline of human stress without snapping under the pressure. So the answer actually lies in the structure of stress itself. Back in the day, whether you were in a medieval village or on the Silk Road, stress was acute. It was a bad harvest, a terrible storm, an illness. It was immediate, sure, but it passed. Today,
Stress is chronic. We have 24/7 tracking, endless digital notifications, and overwhelming social comparisons. The pacing of the past was dictated by the sun. Today, it's dictated by the ping of a smartphone, leading to high isolation masked as connection. Psychologists call one of our biggest modern stressors the paradox of choice. Basically, having endless options for our careers, our identities, and our daily tasks. It literally exhausts the brain, leading to chronic anxiety and decision fatigue. A medieval villager didn't have this problem. If your father was a blacksmith, well, you were a blacksmith. Your clothes, your food, your daily routines were strictly defined by tradition and necessity. Now, that sounds restrictive to us today, but for the human brain, that certainty provided immense emotional stability.
Even in the most extreme, high-stress environments of the past, like imagine traveling the vast, dangerous Silk Road, survival relied on strict routine, not paranoia. Travelers survived through highly synchronized dawn departures, rigorous packing routines, and shared morning rituals. They absolutely didn't survive through individual isolation. They survived by moving as a collective, highly predictable organism.
Which brings us to Section 5, Community as Safety Net. This is really the core discovery of our explainer.
In a medieval village, you had virtually zero privacy. None. If you argued with your spouse, the neighbors heard it. If you were struggling, the community saw it. But you know what? That lack of privacy was actually your safety net. Helping your neighbor wasn't just about being kind, it was insurance for when you inevitably needed help yourself. You simply could not secretly spiral into isolated madness because your neighbors were an automatic, built-in intervention system. So the crucial point here is how this historical data connects right back to the Quincy murder file. The absolute danger of the modern world? It's the basement. Tim Bleifnik's dark plotting happened entirely in secret. He hid behind fake John Smith profiles, disconnected fitness trackers, and basement walls. His complete detachment from a genuine, watchful community allowed his paranoia to fester and turn fatal, without a single person there to intervene. All right, Section 6, the final verdict. Let's close these case files and look at our ultimate takeaways. Unsurprisingly, the jury saw right through the defense's argument about a lack of direct DNA on the bicycle. They focused on the massive, undeniable digital and circumstantial footprint he left behind. Timothy Bleifnik was found guilty of first-degree murder and home invasion, and he was sentenced to natural life in prison without the possibility of parole. During the sentencing, Becky's sister, Sarah Riley, delivered this incredibly powerful impact statement. She noted that his lifetime of isolation and emptiness behind bars is only a small solace as they try to make sense of this inconceivable tragedy and raise Becky's 3 young boys without their mother. And this, brilliantly, yet tragically, illustrates the darkest irony of this entire dossier. Throughout human history, the absolute ideal for survival and mental health was total integration into a community. But Tim Bleifnik sought total isolation to execute his wife. And now, complete and total isolation in a prison cell is his permanent punishment. He got exactly the detachment he engineered. I want to leave you with this final thought to chew on. Have we built a modern world that is so incredibly hyper-connected on a digital level, yet so deeply and physically isolated in reality that it is literally pushing the human mind past its natural breaking point? It's absolutely something to reflect on as we navigate our own routines, our digital habits, and the real-world communities that keep us grounded. Thank you for joining me on this explainer.